coming to you raw and unscripted. Beaming across Ontario and beyond to places like Georgina, Chatham, Kingston, and Little Portugal. This is the Real Hickson Real Estate Podcast. Whether you're listening on your commute or putting on your suit, whether it's your morning stroll or you're on patrol, you just finished prayer or dropped the kids at daycare, you're in the bar, your car, or listening with the bathroom door ajar, near or far, this is the Jess and Giro Show. We're grateful for flattery and prone to inaccuracies. This is your guide to Toronto culture, people, events, news, but most importantly, real estate talk. Yes, hello guys, back for another episode. Obviously, again, it's overdue. It's always overdue. This week, it's exciting. I have JD Plays, otherwise known as Jeremy de Freitas, here on the podcast. Say hello, Jeremy.
Howdy ho, Winslow.
That's what you're gonna lead with?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a Family Matters reference.
Okay, fine.
Have you seen Their House?
We have. I think we have. Okay, so this week we are going to talk about short-term rentals because Jeremy's been through it. He started from nothing, now he's here. We're literally sitting in his beautiful, spacious ultimate bachelor apartment down in Richmond, in the city. So, first thing I want to just do is talk about some news that's happening this week. They've just released the federal budget. Big news. Some changes. Some good things coming. Basically, there has been a task force initiated for housing affordability. They're trying to ramp up some municipalities to be building more homes, Jeremy. Are you excited about that?
So excited. Whereabouts are these new houses going to be?
Well, all around the place. I mean, like, obviously the scope of where people are living in the GTA now, like, it's gone far and beyond all around Ontario now. I think a lot more communities. There's a lot of people there, and I think they need to catch up with infrastructure and build more houses.
Well, it's interesting. I think part of it is initiating it to begin with, but the other thing is also the speed. I feel like there's a big push to find technologies that allow them to build these things to be on pace with the demand. Yeah,
and obviously you can't build them too quickly because then we start having issues with some condos that went up so quick, and then now they have structural issues and all that kind of stuff. So it is a balancing game.
For sure.
But either way, look, we have immigration coming. Do you know the numbers, Jeremy?
What are the numbers?
1.2 million people in Ontario over the next 3 years. That's what they've said.
Wow. So do you think that they're definitely not going to be able to make 1.2 million units over the next 3 years?
No. But look, I think, people are moving further out there. I don't know, the vacancy rate of homes in small towns has probably gone way down. Would you imagine,
Of small towns? I mean, so Chatham is my hometown, as you mentioned in the intro, and I've known that it's exploded as well. It's about 3 hours from Toronto, and all the prices there have also skyrocketed beyond what anybody there, all the people that I know there would have ever believed it would have been. So I think even in the least likely spots, those places are experiencing a huge boom, which is kind of refreshing for a lot of these otherwise small town one-horse towns.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it is frustrating for people that grew up in those areas and all of a sudden they can't afford things, maybe if they were renting or living at home and looking to buy something in their own town. And now they really can't. It's tough. But I mean, this is just a natural process. Like, more people are coming. They're not building any more land. COVID changed things and people have found a way to work from home. Some people indefinitely. And they're moving out to these small towns for a better life, Well,
but it's interesting, too, because I think that flow of migration, especially when it comes to, like, housing prices, it is kind of unidirectional in that, let's say you bought in Toronto, anywhere else is going to be a lot more accessible. But let's say if you bought in Chatham, let's say you sold at a good price and you got your money for it, it still doesn't necessarily mean that you might move to a bigger city. It means you got more to play with, but it wasn't on the same scale as some of the larger cities. So in a way, you're almost I wouldn't say still relegated to any of the outskirts, but I feel like that's still a component that people kind of forget, which is, yes, even if your place went up in value, it doesn't necessarily make the city as appetizing because you're still lost out a little bit on some of the gains that they've had.
But I mean, you look at projects like I think it's the Innisfil project where they're building that huge, like, interconnected highways and train stations and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is something that maybe these people can look forward to. Like, we're going to take these small towns, and yes, like it's beautiful to have quaint towns and all that kind of stuff, and preserve the heritage, preserve the community and the culture. I get all of that, but you will have more pathways opening up to these communities now, and
I think
really
it's
connect
hard.
them.
I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Even we talk about, there's been so much talk about Toronto being a smart city, and we just opened up that new line that's coming up. I think the hardest part for people that are looking to get into real estate is putting time into perspective. When people say things like, oh, it'll be done in 2030, you're like, well, that's forever from now. It's so hard to really say, okay, well, I'm going to commit to this 10-year plan when it's so far out. So you're like, yes, great, it would be great to buy, but now I'm locked into this place for 10 years, and chances are, that 10-year timeline that they gave you is going to quickly turn into 15, and it's going to be, twice the budget. So it's so while it's great that these things are happening, I think there's, especially with our generation now, having a sense of speed and immediacy is also a driving force that when you hear something like a 10-year timeline, doesn't necessarily make it as attractive as people want it to be.
I think especially millennials need to understand this is like a future decision. This is not like, people like on crypto and all that kind of stuff, like get rich now, get rich within the next 6 months, year. Like, sure, there's those avenues for these things, but for real estate, it's just such a long-term thing. Like, you need to be focusing 10, 15 years in the future. By the way, development companies, condos that are coming up next to you right now, that's 20 years in the making, some of these things.
100%.
Like, development, companies, understanding the land, look, this is what I always say, look to where they're building, because they know 15 years, or usually in the future, exactly how that's going to end up looking.
So what do you recommend? Like when you see a client who's maybe like, listen, I'm flexible. Maybe I'm in it to find a place where the value's going up. What research should they be looking at? Like what sources are available to find out where those hotspots are? Because to your point, those developers are the ones that are literally putting hundreds of millions of dollars on the bet that this is going to be the place to go. They've got the connections with the politicians and know what projects are going to be, the ones that are essentially advancing their interests. So if you want to piggyback that as a individual investor or first-time buyer, what do you do?
Well, are we talking about like someone who doesn't own anything?
Somebody who doesn't own anything. Let's start there because that's going to be your lowest common denominator.
Well, for the last 3 years, I was telling people that couldn't afford $550,000 in Toronto, I was telling them to buy in areas like Kitchener, Waterloo, and those $300,000 condos are now $550,000.
So what was the green flag with those communities? What did you look at and say, that's the clue?
You look at, what has the infrastructure? What has the drive? I mean, there's universities around there. They're always going to need people in rentals.
Okay, devil's advocate. I mean, so, there's lots of places that have a university. And then why now, right? How long have they had those universities for? Why in only the last X amount of time have those places gone up?
Right. Well, I think the answer really is it depends on, number one, what you can afford. Number two, what are your needs? Like, are you looking just to straight make money? Like, are you looking to move into these areas eventually? Like, that's the true answer. Like, there's no any one real answer. And, like, if anyone's curious, like, please email me, hicksonrealestateteam@gmail.com. Be like, hey, like, this is kind of what I'm thinking about. Even if you're renting, you don't have any dollar to your name, like, let's set you up for the future. Because that's really what this is about. It's not like, oh, I'm going to save up for 2 years and then, like, jump in. No, that's not how it works. Like, it really takes a lot of planning. You've got to build up your credit, a whole bunch of stuff like this. So, whether it's like, oh, I just need to make some money. Well, I would tell you, if your life is in Toronto and your lifestyle's here, okay, rent wherever the hell you want, right?
What's your response?
And just if you can get in, that's what you do. Get in somewhere.
What's your response to people being like, well, if I had rich parents, I could probably do it, but as of right now, I feel like I've been screwed out of the market. Is your recommendation to them to, like, say, forget about... Actually, I like what you said before, which is real estate is a stock you can live in. It's not necessarily that you have to live there.
Yeah.
So do you just say, listen, find any place to buy. Any place at all that
and here's the realistic thing, and as we all know, and it, by the way, it wasn't easy for your parents to buy property either. You know, everyone relatively had their hardships. You know what I mean? But here's the thing: like, they're now sitting on this real estate that like has appreciated so much. The next phase basically is from boomers transferring their wealth to millennials. And like, you could look at that as like shameful or like embarrassment. I don't want to just ask for handouts, or like people say, oh yeah, their parents helped them out. They sold but that's the reality that we live in. You know what I mean?
That's true.
You have to talk to your parents, and they have to realize maybe they pull out a little bit of equity in their house and help you to get your down payment. You know, they do a reverse mortgage maybe if they have no mortgage. Something like that. You know, like, this is a personal decision for every family to make.
For sure.
But this is the reality we're dealing with. You know what I mean? Like, you could easily turn around and say, well, I worked for everything I have, and you have to go off and do that for yourself. And like, I get that, but relatively it's a much harder economy for people. But like, conversely, there's a lot more opportunities, totally. You know, for people to make, you know, crazy amounts of money. You know, like, we won't delve into that too much, but this is a reality. Like, there is going to be a transfer of wealth, and, you know, whether, you know, it's up to your family whether to be like, yeah, I'm going to spend all my money, I've worked hard for it all my life, fine, or whether like, you know what, I'm going to hand some money out to my kids and help them get in the market, because it's just tough.
That's the point, right? Like, so then why would you buy a house and not have it go up in value, and then you've got, you know, made all this money? The goal is for it to make things easier down the line.
Yeah.
But I get that, but I also get like being discouraged by, you know, the cards are fairly stacked against, you know, a lot of people to buy right now. I don't think anybody, even the experts, you know, knew that it was going to go up this much. Mm-hmm. You know, talking to everybody I know, but to your point, like, it's only going to get worse. So what can you do to put yourself?
So here's the factor, and I say it all the time: if there is one more person in Canada tomorrow than there was yesterday, then there'll continue to be that need for homes, and obviously the federal budget is trying to deal with that, and they're trying to kind of anticipate how many people are coming into Canada in the future. But look, we're running out of land. You know what I mean? The most expensive land is actually above the land, which is air rights. That's like out of control.
Which is funny too, because like I hear this big thing, and I think this is kind of a Toronto and maybe every big city kind of thing, is a lot of people they play both sides, which is they say, oh man, I can't believe they knocked down that restaurant. That was my favorite restaurant. And what are they going to do? They're going to build a condo for it, right? And then the next day they're like, wow, housing prices. I can't believe we can't even afford it. I'm like, you got to pick one. And that's one thing I find interesting is like, by the way, for all the people that are, you know, listening and they are like kind of the green enthusiasts, remember that condos are the most ecologically efficient way to house people. Mm-hmm. Every time you have a lawn, every time you have a huge house, that's more energy, that's more maintenance, that's more you know, machinery that you have to go buy, that you got to add oil and gas to your lawnmower and all that stuff, and every one of those individual tools and things that you need.
And it's not using the land as efficiently as it could.
Now, here's I'll totally meet them halfway. I think that part of the application to be like a condo developer and deciding to have your property is you need to make a really good case of, okay, what are we going to do to add some character or some sense of community? What are we going to do to better the place and not just have this big concrete block in the sky?
Yeah.
What can we do to make the city attractive and not just this Tetris-looking
thing? There's been a huge change from, you know, the 80s in Toronto, just building just straight up apartment buildings and maybe a few amenities here and there. But now we're seeing modern condos with energy efficient ratings. Just for the start, now they have commercial spaces underneath that create, you know, little opportunities for shops to go in, or retail, or cafes or bars, and that's building community. Little hairdressers go in there.
Totally.
And now they really have green rooftops. Some of them that is harvesting rainwater, and it's nicer to look at for the people on the upper floor. You know, there's a whole lot of things that they are now doing with condos, which is quite nice for people to live in.
One of the things I ended up writing my thesis on back in the day was the idea of having essentially vertical farming, which I think is a really interesting industry. And so apparently they did some pilot projects out in Surrey, BC, and apparently it's super, or at least popular enough out in like Singapore and Japan and stuff. Essentially, imagine a condo, except you tear down every one of the walls on each floor, and it's just row upon row of hydroponically grown produce.
Right.
So the idea being that maybe you dedicate, let's say, the first 20 floors to regular traditional houses or condos, and then let's say the 20 floors above that is all hydroponically, ecologically efficiently, easy to transport produce that essentially feeds in part the whole building or maybe the surrounding area depending on the yield. But I thought that was really interesting because I'm like, that might be the only way, as we go forward. I'm like, as we're trying to, improve our eco footprint. I thought it was really interesting, but I haven't heard any plans to do that in Toronto. Has that ever come up in anything that you've seen?
Not that I've seen. I've seen like live walls and green hanging that helps with energy loss and irrigation and all that kind of stuff for the building. Obviously that adds like oxygen to the air and takes the carbon dioxide from the city, stuff like that. I don't think maybe we're quite there yet, but that's the exciting future.
It's funny too because like sometimes you think about it, and I actually was a roofer for a summer a long time ago, and then it's funny once you actually get on a roof, you realize it's so out of sight, out of mind. But have you ever actually been like on an airplane and just flown over and see how many shingles are out there? There's just so many, and imagine if every one of those shingles, even half, 25%, 15% of them were green. Yeah. Some form of green.
You're talking like Scandinavian countries now.
Yeah,
they're all about that.
So it could be a real game changer. I mean, I guess we're living in a cold climate. It's not going to be the same, but we're all trying to make even micro strides if we can.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like to reference countries like Denmark, for example, that they've got really interesting ideas and futuristic ways that they're doing things.
For sure.
In the same thing, though, these are countries with very small populations, and they're able to do this. Obviously Canada's a much bigger country, so we're talking about like mainstream economy, mainstream industry. We just have to work get the ideas out there, implement them, prove that they're worth it, and then just like electric cars are really getting pushed this year.
I think it has to reach that breaking point, right? Like it's always going to be a pain in the ass, inefficient, expensive, up until a certain amount of adoption, and then once you get there,
there's some people making too much money off of
resisting.
So that's what I feel like. What happened with electric cars? I think they had all of it ready to go. They were just waiting for that tipping point, and they were holding on to diesel and petrol cars for as long as they could.
Exactly.
And now things are flipping, so it's good to see.
And here we are, yeah.
So that was a bit of a tangent, but I liked it. It's nice to talk about. So the other news is affordability is coming in. That's fantastic. They got a task force. They're trying to really make housing affordable for the future. The other thing they're doing is they're banning foreign buyers. Now, this is a little bit wild, but at the same time, it's not a huge amount of people, surprisingly enough, that are part of the market. I mean, I think they say it's 1%.
I have one qualm with this idea.
Yes.
Define affordability. No one's ever put a number or a metric. They say affordability, and I'm all for it. Well, but who knows what that means?
I would love to get a numbers guy on this show, or girl for that matter. I think it's to do with like minimum wage, the cost of things.
So, but what does that mean?
Living, inflation, all of these factors feeding into like.
Sure. But it's like, okay, so let's say it's in relation to minimum wage. Is it like you should be able to afford a home working minimum wage for 5 years or whatever? Like, how is it in relation to minimum wage? Or, you could pay the mortgage off on the average house or condo even at $15.50 an hour.
Here's what's changed. Our parents bought and had mortgages. Some of them didn't even have mortgages, by the way. Jess's mom bought her place on a line of credit. But given these are all still tough times back then in the 80s.
You said they were paying like 12%.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So I was going to just say the interest rates back then were up to, I think, as much as 16%.
That's insane.
Right now, we're looking at 3%. And a year and a half ago, some of my clients were getting 1.3%. Like, that's like free money practically.
It's perspective. I think a lot of people will not have the perspective. That said, it's not as if I don't think let's say somebody who was paying your 15% or 16% is going to be like, wow, in our days, we had it way worse than you. It's like, they would be like, yeah, we got screwed as well. You know what I mean? It's like, we're glad that you don't have to pay for it.
Look, you can have arguments on either side. Like, we're talking about like cities that relied on some factories being open or closed to supply the economy. Now you have people that would usually go and work at Fortino's stacking shelves, shaking their rump on OnlyFans and making 10 times, 100 times what they would normally. Like, we don't have this.
We are sex positive, by the way. We are sex positive.
Shout out to all the OnlyFans people out there grinding.
Make your money, boo-boo.
Listen, make it. How are you going to make it? Like, we're in extreme times, like where affordability is a question mark. It's not just like, I'm going to. So look, and like, it's just this whole relevance thing. Like, I don't want to say the 80s was easier or now is easier, whatever. It's each era has its hardships. But going back to my original point, like, our parents were getting a house. They were getting a house to live in, right? And now it's more of like, you don't expect to have paid off your mortgage in your lifetime.
I don't think so. And it's funny because that's like the dream. And there was the good comedian who had a bit about that. He's like, blah, blah, blah. Somebody was asking me if I own my own home. He's like, own. That's a term that needs some definitions, considering I won't own it till I'm fucking 68.
Yeah.
So,
but anyways, that's kind of it on that. Speaking of interest rates, they are going up next week. So please, guys, if you are listening to this and you're thinking about buying 3 months, 6 months down the line, just go to your mortgage broker, lock in a rate. Like, it can potentially save you hundreds, if not $1,000s.
You know what? I think that's such important advice is, let's just say you can't afford anything. You have 1 cent to your name. It does not matter. Go into your bank and have the conversation. Put all your cards on the table. Find out exactly what it is that you need to have. Let's just say you can cobble together some sources. Maybe get a little bit from your parents. This is your wage and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Create a plan.
What you just said, by the way, is exactly what happens. I see it all the time. Right. A little bit from your parents. You have some savings. A little bit. This is how it happens now. This is the modern real estate game.
But I think a lot of people are scared that they, and I was the same way. I'm like, I don't want to admit how little I know about this stuff. Yeah. And it's they're there to help you. They're not there to judge you. And if you want to be like, it's all about the money, fine. Guess what? They pay a lot of people to make you feel comfortable and that they can give you the answers and all that stuff. And I promise if you go there and ask the right questions, you will come out there feeling a weight has lifted, even if you don't feel like you can buy a property. Now you will feel empowered.
At least have the conversation with the bank, the blank lender or the mortgage broker. They will tell you and put you on the path to know exactly, okay, this is the next steps I need to take. Exactly. Maybe you need to take 10 steps. Maybe you need to take 2 steps. Building your credit, just stuff like this. They'll put you on the path to success. And at the end of the day, there's 2 kinds of people that I see. There's the quiet people and the loud people. The loud people are the ones that see Blog TO posts, for example, and they're screaming about how unaffordable things are. Right. And they're complaining about to their landlords. And I get it's frustrating. It's hard. You feel oppressed. Maybe you were given nothing by your parents. Everyone has their story and different journey. But you need to turn yourself from a complainer into a quiet person. And the quiet people are the ones that found their way in. Some had it easier, some had it harder, but at the end of the day, they clawed, they fought, maybe they had 2 jobs, maybe they shake their rump on OnlyFans. Whatever you did, you found a way in. Maybe you bought in Toronto, if you're lucky. Maybe you bought way out in different areas. You found your way in, and you're being quiet because you're appreciating the game. The game's not going to wait around for you. They're not going to hear your complaints.
I think the other thing too is like, why? Why is it so important to get into real estate? Why all this stuff? And I think the reason why, and obviously you're as passionate as you are about the industry, is because it's not just about having a house. It's not about having a house to live in. It's about having a little bit of peace, a little bit of safety, a little bit of just feeling that you're going to be taken care of, at least partially. It's just such a huge step. And so, when you have yourself a place, you're like, worst comes to worst, I always have a place to live. Worst comes to worst, I've defended myself against some inflation. Worst comes to worst, I can, sit on it for a year and then sell it. Yeah. And so it just gets you this little
it gives you control.
This kernel of control and like peace. So that's why anybody who talks about this stuff, including you and a lot of other people that are in the industry, is because it's such a source of relief and pressure release of, how am I going to make, retirement work? How am I supposed to make these ends meet? It's not from working the rest of your life.
Everyone wants the peace. And imagine you're renting a house out, let's just say Newmarket. It was built 3-4 years ago, and it's beautiful. And you got your job downtown in Newmarket, and you just live in this fantastic life. And then one day your landlord turns around and says, "We're going to sell the house." Like that's not fair. I mean, that's the way it is if you were in that situation, but it's not nice. And you really need to just take control of your life. You should have the choice to stay or go.
Totally.
Wherever you are.
100%.
And people are, again, talking about this again, like people have a different idea of what their lives can look like. It doesn't have to be in the cities.
I think a lot of people are sold, and it's not fair to us as well, because we're sold the idea of home ownership through the lens of a very outdated and antiquated viewpoint.
Yeah.
And that
no
is
one taught us
so,
this, by the way.
it's,
My
honestly,
parents kind of taught me. The only way my parents taught me is we were always moving.
Yeah,
And it wasn't until
Right.
like I got older and understood rent and buying and all that kind of stuff that I realized they were making money moves. I was frustrated that we were always moving, but they were making money moves.
You know what? And I always think about this too. It's like, why would you? You're a kid. You want to get candy. That's your main goal in life. Jerry Seinfeld has a great bit on it. It's like, why would you care about this stuff? It's once you start taking money out of your pocket, once you start, getting up in age and you start saying, all right, I really got to think about this. I don't blame any kid for not giving a shit about real estate.
Yeah.
Why would you?
And there's a pretty good chance that you're in your 30s and you go to dinner parties or
exactly,
bars,
and
you hear that Tony bought his first new place. You're like, oh, you're like happy about them, and you're like, oh, when am I? I'm never going to be able to own. They must have got help from their parents.
Yeah, exactly.
See this circle that we just created here? Like,
For
they
sure.
must have got help from their parents. They must have. No, the reality is you were never taught how to deal with these things. Right. I wish I had a savings account that I was building since the age of 18, for example.
For sure, yeah.
Just instead of buying that last drink at the bar that I was way too drunk to buy in the first place, throw the money in there, watch it grow, put it in, a GIC or something like that. These are acronyms I've never understood before until now.
Totally.
And just building that money, building the money, and having the ability to forge your own freedoms, I think is in the underlying message.
For sure. I think it's perspective. It just takes time. You got to get affected by real estate in order to be cared about it.
Okay, so let's segue to you, because we've touched on it a little bit. I want to hear about you and your your real estate journey. Because right now you have a really nice bachelor condo rather in Richmond, and you have a cottage out in Barry's Bay. So what did you think about real estate before you started? Like what ideas did you have about it?
So I would have been, when I actually started caring about real estate, was I remember I had just got a new job that had a significant pay increase. And so at the time I was renting with some friends. And essentially what had happened was a good commission check came through. And so with the one commission check, I was kind of sitting on it, and I was just like, all right, well, don't be an idiot. This is probably more money than you've ever seen in because me, piddly, fucking 25 years old, didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
But I knew that the one thing you're supposed to do is buy a house.
Right.
And so
And did your parents teach you that? Like, did they tell you this?
No. It's just something that you kind of keep hearing. My mom had done some real estate. She's had some rental properties back in the but she wasn't necessarily being, oh, you should do this. But I would casually hear her talking about, oh, I could get rent from this unit. I could do this with this property. And so I kind of heard a few things just through her. I wouldn't say she said, you have to do this. But so essentially what happened was I was living with these guys, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to move out. And I actually moved into a place on Wellesley, and that was a rental at the time.
Right.
And so the one thing I will say, the one feather in my cap, I would say, and this is a bit of a tangent, but if you are looking to rent a place, and let's say you find an ad anywhere online, and you say, that one looks really nice, do yourself a favor and put all your stuff together in a neat little file folder, like your income, your credit rating, pay the $20. Pay the $20. It'll pay off
For
dividends.
the credit report, you mean?
Your credit report, your income, your references, your resume, whatever you have to do, put it in a nice little thing. It's about 15 minutes worth of effort and $20. Because what's going to end up happening, and this was the reason why I ended up getting the place, is I really love this new place. And I went there, I said, I thought I was going to really like it. So I handed them over all that stuff. So imagine you're now...
Who do you hand the stuff to?
To the landlord.
Right.
So I went there, viewed the place, met the landlord, and...
So you're offering your tenant application.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's right. And also you're completed, fully filled out tenant application. Don't wait for them to give it to you, and then you got to fill it out.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
By the way, guys, I've done a whole podcast on renting, all the tips and tricks. Basically, you just need me, and I'll guide you through it. But continue.
But so, anyways, and so I knew at the end of it that I would really like the place. So I'd gone to the place, took a view. Landlord was super cool, and I said at the end of this, I was like, I really like it. I thought I would, and I handed him over this package. So now imagine you're the landlord and you get this fully curated package of everything. All you have to do, and it's if you want to, is make the call to the references. Mm-hmm. Essentially what I've done is I've done all their homework for them. Yeah. I've handed them the solution on the silver platter. Mm-hmm. They don't have to make any call. They don't have to check my credit. They don't have to do any of that stuff. I've made their life as easy as possible. So let's say I give you that and then somebody else comes in and walks in and says, oh, I like it. Can I have the application? Who are you going to give it to? So in a competitive market, do the landlord's homework and you will get the place. Yeah. It shows that you're organized. It shows that you're on time. If you want to sweeten the deal, you have your post-dated checks ready to go, just ready to make them out to whoever. And it shows that you're serious. And that was actually, I think, one of the smallest, most underlooked things that I've done that has actually really affected my whole real estate portfolio because once I got that place, I really liked it. I love living there. I said, listen, if you're ever ready to sell, let me know. Right. He said, I will keep you in mind.
What year was this? Just
2015. This would have been 2015.
Okay, because this was like 2015 was a way easier. It was still not easy. It was still not easy.
I think I got the rental in 2013, 2014, and then a year later in 2015, that's when it closed. Yeah.
Since 2010, things have really started to ramp up in the city.
Absolutely.
So, if you're lucky, your landlord could offer... I mean, to be honest, by the way, I don't know if many of you know this, there is a law called the right of first refusal. So if you're renting a place and your landlord goes to sell it, you actually have the right to purchase it
before anybody else.
Yeah, but it has to be based on... And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. It has to be based upon an offer they would accept from someone else. They have to offer it to you first.
So does that mean, okay, I'm going to sell it. I put it on the market. So let's say it's going for $500,000. You have to offer me, I guess some other buyer would give you the $500,000 or offer you that, and you say, thanks for that offer. Then you hand that offer to your tenant and be like, hey, can you compete with this? And then they have the right to say,
I'll have to, you know what? I'm gonna have to go back to the lawyers because I've never been through this situation myself.
Interesting. Okay.
I've heard about it. In fact, I have sold one condo with the tenant in it. But they ended up just bringing us an offer by themselves. Oh, okay. But look, in a super competitive market like downtown, for example, we would have to go through that. But either way, you have to offer it. It's the tenant's right to basically refuse to buy it. Otherwise, they have to come up with a reasonable offer.
I feel that also gives you a bit of a bargaining chip because they know you, they know where you live. And
whether that matters to someone, whether they're like, you know what, I'm really happy that they're buying this home. I know they're going to take care of it. So there's sometimes that side of it, people, and then some people like, you know what? At the end of the day,
dollars and cents.
It's just about the money.
Exactly.
Okay, and so we're kind of touching on it. What did you know about the process of real estate? You knew nothing. Who taught you?
What?
Anyone?
The process taught me. I would say this. The landlord seemed pretty well versed and he was super well organized and all that stuff. So he said, she's like, okay, I just need to do this. So the interesting thing was, and this is actually part of what helps you save the money, is he and I just did it one-on-one. So I know you're a real estate agent. I'm sorry.
No,
but at the time, what happened was...
But this is part of it too.
And that's the thing is for when I was the tenant, I said, when are you ready to sell? A year later, he said, yeah, I'm ready to sell. Let's talk. He was going to list it for $314. I said, what happens if we do it directly, no agent? And we both happened to say exactly the same number, $300,000, nice round number. Yeah. And we agreed on it. I think he had a lawyer or connection to it. So it was just legal work that we had to go through.
Yeah.
And so we both saved a ton of money on the fees. We both saved, it's whatever, $7,000, or he saved, the 14 grand, whatever. And it was a quick, it was easy.
For context, this is on Wellesley and Young Street.
Young Street, yeah.
It was a nice condo,
Corner
600 and something square feet. It was just a 1 bedroom and had parking.
It did not have parking.
Oh, it didn't have parking. So you bought that separately.
Yeah.
Okay, but in 2015, you were able to buy this for $300,000 privately.
Yeah.
And people are just spat out their coffee. They're wanting coffee. That's just a price you don't hear about.
It's so ridiculous.
And look, I feel like that whole private thing, I'm not going to stand here and say it doesn't work, because it does, obviously. I feel like these days it's changed a bit. Like, that's very old school.
I would say it's very unique. I will never buy a house without a real estate agent. For one thing and one thing alone, it's just like, it is a full-time job. The rigmarole of sending this paperwork to this person and checking that box.
What did you call it? You said I was like the quarterback of...
You're quarterbacking the whole thing.
Like there's the blockers and there's the...
100%. Because to sign all this stuff, make sure it's done right, review it, hand it to the lawyers, do all that stuff.
This is what I always say. Because basically, in a nutshell, like in the 80s, I keep referencing it. I just think it's a good point to reference.
Yeah.
Because it was, the start of something else.
Yeah.
In the 80s, it was the shepherd and the sheep. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Yeah. The real estate agent comes around, you bring out the fine china, you put on the...
Right.
He's coming. He's coming.
That's so,
could you imagine?
For sure.
And obviously, I wasn't alive, nor doing real estate then, but I know stories I've heard from people, how it used to be. And now we have the wolves and the wolf wrangler.
Right.
The circus trainer.
Interesting.
Because they all think, I'm fine. They can be a lone wolf or a pack wolf, or they can do it themselves. I can do all of this. I don't need... there's a lot of industries being disrupted and replaced, but for real estate, I can unequivocally say 100% that it will never be replaced. They've tried to do it, and here's why.
Was it Zillow or was it...
Sure, there was Zolo that tried to do real estate, and they just stopped last year because they knew it just wasn't working. It can't be a volume game.
It's
this
a
is
personal
relationship
thing.
game. It's
For
a personal
sure
thing.
It is.
And it takes a lot of human mind finessing.
It's trust.
So you could very 100%, you could find on a real estate website a house, and you could definitely go and see it yourself. Okay, show yourself in through the front door, and you could definitely talk straight to the seller yourself, and you could definitely come up with something. But you're missing a whole lot of key components here. What about legal? What about your mortgage broker? Are you going to figure that out yourself?
Renovations and getting things
What
fixed,
about
conditions.
what about the inspection? What about what are you looking for? What about if you bought in an area and you just realize that there's a dead body in the backyard?
Or there's a new development coming up.
There's so many things that just, as soon as you like a place and want to put an offer on it, that's when it goes out the window. Right. Where you can do it yourself. Because I can tell you, I would love to tell you that each offer is like copy and paste. It is so unique. There is what are you including in the sale? What are you not including in the sale? And even when there is a buyer agent and a seller agent, and we've gone through all this stuff, there are still things that come up. As we found out when you found the cow tongues in your cottage in a jar.
Well, somebody put it there like, listen, I was renting a place or whatever at the time, and the agent was like, listen, we got to have no wrinkles. And I was like, what, like wrinkles? I was like, that's an interesting. He's like, just any sort of hiccup in the process, and there's never a deal without a hiccup.
Yeah.
You forgot to, you missed your initials on this paperwork.
Exactly.
You forgot to add in the chattels, or you forgot to add in this condition. Yeah. Is it going to be broom swept or fully cleaned? Like,
did you pick a closing day that's on a public holiday, for example?
Oh, quick little fact.
Or on a Friday, a closing day on a Friday, and it can't close for whatever reason, and you're stuck in no man's land on Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And you're fucked. You got to get a bridging loan. All this crap.
Quick tip for anybody listening. One thing I found out as well: make your closing date in and around the 15th of the month, because on the ends of the month, on the cusp of the month, that's when things go crazy and you really screw.
Well, I would say that up unless it's a Friday or a public holiday.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So that's why I say in around mid-month is the better time to do it.
Right.
And that's when I've talked to like lawyers who are like that. Obviously, everything closes at on the end of the month. So if you want to make your life a lot easier, less stressed, have some time and flexibility, and not be chasing a deadline, make your closing date middle of the month, and it'll be.
Well, I'll tell you that it's kind of random for me, but maybe there is a pattern.
For the lawyers that I spoke to, so maybe talk to your lawyer and be like, maybe that's a good another.
But again, just this one question, this is this could be a make or break question. Like,
for sure,
you could just not close and then you have to get sued, and it's like just based on one thing, that it's just amongst a multitude of things.
So I guess here's a question, just based on your experience. Let's say there was some honest mistake in the paperwork. You still want to go through the deal. Do you find that vindictive that you're like, listen, I'll give you an extra 48 hours to just smooth out whatever you did? Like,
yeah.
Or are they like, no, we're coming for your life?
Usually it's like, it's like, I'm going to deal with the other agent and see if we can't just figure it out. If it goes beyond that and it can't be figured out, then it obviously just gets put to the lawyers. And that's what they're paid for. They work it out. At the end of the day, a lot of things just come down to like, yeah, we'll just do an amendment. If it's really vindictive, like that, like you're saying, like, I don't really come across that. I
don't think so, because I'm like...
It's usually... You know what? At the end of the day, money just solves it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
That's really what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you rented your condo, you were able to buy it from your landlord, which is great. Again, it's a unique situation. Like, it's going to be harder and harder to see that these days, just because, the prices are really high now, and it's worth putting it in real estate agents' hands to deal with. And okay, so then you got your place, and then you lived in that. You enjoyed that.
So I lived there for a bit, and then at the time I was traveling a lot for work. So a friend of mine was saying to me, "Hey, you're gone probably. I don't know. It might have been like a week out of the month." And they said, "While you're gone, you could be making money on your place." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Have you heard of Airbnb?" I'm like, "No." Shows me the website, walks me through the whole thing, and I was like, okay, well, this can't be that hard. You got to keep the place clean, maybe have somebody over or whatever. And so anyways, I set the place up, and over the course of the weekend, I think maybe the first weekend that I rented it out was Pride weekend, and so right along Yonge Street is when the parade and stuff was. So you would have got a view of the parade, and it's a great spot. Anyways, I ended up making like $400 a night for over the course of like 3 days or something like that. So that's when like things really clicked. I'm like, what? There's this kind of market for it. And now this was just as Airbnb was probably 5 to 10% through its way of, let's call it, its current maturity. Right. And so you could charge a lot more then. And also it was, the Pride weekend. But anyways, it was lucrative enough that I decided, all right, I wonder how permanent I can make this. So it became so lucrative that I was actually, let me move out. I ended up renting a place at Queen and Dufferin, so that way I could turn that place into a full-time Airbnb. Yep.
So again, guys, you don't necessarily have to live in what you buy. Jeremy went and rented the area he wanted, the lifestyle he wanted. Meanwhile, he had this investment property. He was doing Airbnb.
And I wouldn't say it was all like this, but in the best of times, that place that I was renting out on Airbnb, it paid for the mortgage on that property. It paid for all the utilities on that property. It paid for my rent on the other place, and it paid for all my utilities and internet. So I was literally living for free. Call it for 3-ish months over the course of the summer.
Yeah, it fluctuates.
It fluctuates, but it was still such a great income source that I was probably covering at minimum 30 to 50% of my own living expenses. The mortgage itself on the other place was all covered. In terms of my personal Jeremy expenses was about 50% covered. So much more of your paycheck is going into your pocket. And the other cool thing is that then I don't think Airbnb was like doing all the tax stuff and everything because it was so new. They hadn't formalized the tax.
It's all. I mean, even now in Toronto, it's very hard to do Airbnbs. Sure. But just to give an idea of how it can be done. Well, I mean, now, we eventually sold that condo for you, and you bought. Thankfully, like at the start of the pandemic, you were like, you know what, I want to do life like outside of the city. I want to just get out for a bit and let it all blow over. And we bought that cottage in Barry's Bay, which, it's not just nowhere. It's, where your mum lives, it has a place, and which you are familiar with anyways. But at the time, it was like relatively cheap compared to what it is now.
I mean, I think it was the pandemic had everybody thinking about it. And I was thinking, if the only reason that people are in the city is for their jobs, and now that whole need to be in the city is gone because of the pandemic and everyone's working from home, I, put a little feather in my cap. I kind of predicted that the prices would go up because if that was the one thing keeping people in there, and I know once you open the Pandora's box of working from home, who the hell wants to commute an hour there and back? So I knew that it's going to be hard to put that cap back in the bag. And so with that being the case, I was like, all right, well, let me take a look at some of these properties. By then, my place had gone up enough that I could, or I think I had sold at the time or close to. And so I looked at some properties up there, and the goal was essentially to use lockdown as first of all, I could go up there, enjoy being outside and all that stuff, and have a cottage and property, and I had a great time doing it. But also, it was to have a fairly uninterrupted window to renovate and do all this stuff, and the goal was to always turn it into an Airbnb.
So that cottage was fairly updated,
it was
reasonably.
Great,
It still needed some touches here and there,
it
but
needed lipstick.
The bones of it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, also you took into account some risk. You knew with a cottage property, and you worked this into your business model or whatever. This about the sump and different things, in that property. So you worked that in,
I think to me, this idea with Airbnb is that you're making money threefold. One is through the actual, the property itself. Obviously, you're getting your rentals through Airbnb. The second thing is that the property values are rising. And then also importantly, I think it's the most overlooked, is that it's a tax haven for a lot of stuff. So anytime that you want to put in obviously, depending on the scale of the renovations that you're doing, some stuff has different taxable implications. But let's say you want, you're painting it, furniture, supplies, cleaning supplies, utilities, everything that it essentially takes to run your micro hotel, as I like to call them, all of that's tax deductible. So people forget that, a lot of the expenses are also now getting tax deductible. If it was your own place, that's not tax deductible. Mm-hmm. So in three ways, you're managing to get this money. And then the other thing is that because if you were to invest in a place, some people want to do Airbnbs just anywhere. I like doing it in places where people have a reason to go. Yeah. Because when you can get a vacation rate, my experience is that you can make easily 3 to 4x what you would on a traditional lease agreement. Yeah. And so it's paying off your mortgage, it's increasing in value, gives you a place to have those tax benefits. Why the hell would you buy a regular place to live in and do a traditional lease agreement? Unless you just...
And I think the important thing to recognize here is you took the risk. You sold your home in Toronto. You moved to cottage country to do it up while you were living there. It just happened to be a haven for you from COVID. Mm. Then when you had finished it, now you've turned it into this, there's some tech that you brought to the home, all that kind of stuff. And you created the experience. You've taken the nice photos, whatever. And now you've got it back rented at Airbnb. And now you've bought your condo back in Toronto. Mm-hmm. You're able to work with the mortgage broker to shift some things around, keep the leverage value down. You took advantage of some lower interest rates. Mm-hmm. I get it, but you really took a big risk, and it will pay off in the future.
Well, it's funny you say that because having bought at the beginning of the pandemic, now it's gone up a good amount, and so I'm potentially doing a model that I've never invented, but I've kind of found out just through the course of going through this, which is trying to repeat this process. Why would you not? If the place is always making you more money than it's costing you, I think that's a pretty good investment. Yeah. Especially in real estate where it's normally, a traditional lease agreement will keep your head above water in terms of a few expenses. Yeah. Yeah. But why not make some money in the short term and the long term? Mm-hmm. And so this place having gone up in value, now I'm looking at Kelowna because there's some great spots out in Big White. And I mean, let's be honest, skiing ain't a cheap hobby. Mm. So the people that are going out there, they have money, they're willing to spend it, and so
plus a lot of rich people from the Calgary and stuff go there as well.
And it's not just seasonal, or it's not just winter. It's in the summer as well. Mountain biking, all that stuff.
Yeah. Actually, did you know that Whistler has a bigger mountain biking season than they do a skiing season?
I'm not surprised. Same thing with Blue Mountain, even here. Yeah. Collingwood was actually an option for a long time because it's nice to be kind of close. It's what Toronto people, including me, thought was good skiing, so they'll go there and pay whatever exorbitant amounts for essentially a bunny hill. But you know what? If you're taking the kids or the family, you want to rent it for a weekend, whatever, you're not necessarily hardcore. You want to go and just get out of the city. Great option. And I was playing a show there in the summer of a couple years ago, and I was like, wow, I was surprised to see how many people were there. And the woman that was organizing the event, she goes, "Oh yeah, you have no idea. It's more busy in the summer than it is in the winter." Yeah. So you're telling me that Collingwood has a huge draw in the summer and in the winter of a typically higher socioeconomic crowd. Yeah. Yeah, you're probably damn right that I want to buy some rental property in there for, the family who's going to outfit their kids with $4,000 worth of ski gear. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they can afford, the $500 a night for whatever you decide you want to offer. So,
Yeah, or there's, like Aurelia that people are saying
Yeah.
cost as much as a neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit of a joke. I got
a
a few things on that. Number one, 900,000 Canadians, not the same as 9,000 US.
Yeah.
Also, there are some really dodgy neighborhoods in LA that keep the average down.
That's true, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people cherry picking these stats, to put them together.
Yeah.
By the way, Aurelia is beautiful. Has some beautiful cottages out there.
Aurelia is super nice.
And we're talking about people that are moving to Toronto, which I called New York City light, because it really is.
Yeah.
That now the prices are there, and people are coming here with money, and they're like, well, where are the Hamptons in Ontario? Well, like kind of like.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's
100%.
obviously never going to be the same level, but like that's kind of where they're going with the money. So
100%. And I think maybe the last thing I'll say about it is I think a lot of people are afraid when they see the debt, when they see it, because I see it in my account and I'm like, holy shit, I'm $1.2 million in debt. Like this feels like a tragedy.
And this is a super important point because
get scared.
There's good and bad debt.
That's right. I think don't get scared of that. Look at what you're making on it. Like if anything, I would say take on as much debt as you possibly can. And the reason why I say that is a couple of reasons. If it's good debt, take on as much debt as the bank will let you have. That's number one. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is when people try to get a good deal on a place. Let's just go with the vacation rental property. They might say, oh, you know what? Fine. I could buy the place on the beach for, let's say, $1 million. But you know what? There's a place just off it's a 5-minute walk. That's it. And it's like half the price. Okay. That's option number one. But to me, that adds more risk. And the reason why I say is because if it's on the beach and has the hot tub and has all that stuff, you build that into the price and you know it's going to book. You know it's going to book and you know it's going to book first at the higher rate. So even though you're spending let's say the $1 million, let's say it was 50% more expensive, but the rate that you can charge is maybe double or triple the amount that you can for a place that's off the strip. Then all of a sudden, that is the better option. I feel less comfortable spending less to try and cut a few expenses here and there. Meanwhile, you'd build it in the cost anyways of the nicer place that people are going to rent first.
And here's kind of a funny comment. How often have you bought like a $15 beer in the airport?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And I say this because you wouldn't buy a $15 beer like down the road at your local.
That's right.
But you would buy it in the airport. Now, as soon as you touch the word wedding to anything, it immediately jacks up the price.
That's right.
As soon as you're in this headspace of like wedding or like holiday, immediately your like idea and concept of value kind of goes out the window. Like, what are you gauging against? I mean,
Kevin O'Leary had an amazing. One thing that I found was there was one pitch that he was evaluating, and it was this wedding company, and a lot of people come there and pitch their wedding business, and this one was to get like essentially the carpet that you walk when you go down the aisle. Mm-hmm. It was a branded carpet, so you could have like the logo of essentially you and your wife's initials or whatever, and it'd have like a logo, an icon, whatever, something personalized for you. And his critique of their business plan, he's like, "You're not charging nearly enough," and they're like, "What?" And he's like, yeah, weddings is where you want to hit them when they're not looking. That's when people want to spend the money. That's when they are, nobody's, trying to cut corners because it's a prestige. It's the swagger, the emotional sell. And I was like, that's so brilliant because a lot of people forget you're not selling a carpet. You're selling the emotional value. You're selling an experience. You're selling the vibe.
Yeah.
And there's another great podcast, it's a marketing podcast called Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, and I love it. And one of the things that they talk about when they're consulting a lot of their clients, he was a marketing executive back in the day, and they forced them to answer the question, what are you selling? And so in the case, I think they said Michelin tires, it's like, you don't sell tires, you're selling safety.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're selling stuff like anything like that, it's...
Yeah, to be honest, just to interject, I don't sell real estate. I actually sell lifestyles.
100%. That's a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
And you sell them that a lifestyle, you sell them the comfort, and I think to a certain extent, some prestige too. Some people want to show off.
For sure.
When you say this place is great for entertaining, what are people thinking about? I can't wait to put my hors d'oeuvres on my big kitchen island and everyone be impressed.
We are emotional beings and we think emotionally.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up. Thanks for coming and talking with us, Jeremy.
I'd love to do it again. This is so much fun. We thought it was going to be like 30 minutes or almost not an hour.
This is just what happens. This is a real conversation. Yeah. This is unedited, pretty much unscripted. I mean, I had a few questions asked you, but that's kind of it. This is what it's all about. Like, we need to talk about real estate more. We need to like bring each other up. We need to not like snark when you hear that someone bought a new property. We need to be like happy for people and realize that it's a hard thing to do, and no one's really taught us how to do this. And that's kind of what I want to do, and that's what Jeremy wants to do. And we want to just like kind of empower people to just.
I think that's like the one thing to impart to the audience is. There's so many people that don't know what the hell is going on. I didn't know. Nobody knows. Don't feel embarrassed. It's so stupid. If it was not in your purview as a kid, if you're just getting into it and it's not on your radar, if you're just trying to make ends meet and you're taking care of your family, whatever it is, why would you know this stuff? So don't feel bad about it. Just feel free that you can seek out this stuff, and the people that have the information, they want to help you.
Yeah.
You know.
And again, this is a long-term thing. Whether you're 15, whether you're 25, 35, 45, doesn't matter. Whether you start now, happens in 5 years, 1 year, 10 years. The important thing is to set the goal, understand, ask me anything you want, talk to a mortgage broker. That is the path. And, you know, like my dream one day, now, I'm thinking about pulling out a HELOC because I have some equity in my property. Mm-hmm. I did a podcast about, you know, where Jess and I got to now versus where we started. Mm-hmm. And now we're thinking about pulling some equity out, maybe buying an investment condo, doing something that you did maybe, or doing a long-term rental. Mm-hmm. Either way, this is wealth building. And this is what the secret is. Wealth building is the secret. It's what you want to get to. I'd love to just have multiple properties and own passive income, and it's not coming from nothing. It is something that I'm intending to build. Mm-hmm. And I think you're on the same path, Jeremy. So
far, so good. As I tell everybody, I reserve the right to screw this all up at any point.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to guys. Of course, you can check out Jeremy JD Plays.
At JD Plays Music. That's the music account. And for anyone that's interested in seeing the cottage, it's at the Carson View Lodge on Instagram. So
in Barry's Bay,
Carson View Lodge.
Yeah, love that. Love the plugs. And Jeremy just blew up on TikTok last night. Got like 50,000 hits on his like Guyanese background video.
Well,
gotta love that. Hashtag Guyanese. Shout out to all the Guyanese listeners out there. And so we'll do this again, Jeremy. But thanks.
Can't wait. My pleasure.
Speak to you guys next week. If you have any questions, again, please. Like, we just want to talk. This is what we're doing. We're talking all the time about real estate. hicksonrealestateteam at gmail.com. Hit us up on Instagram at hicksonrealestate. And we will see you guys next week.